My name is Anna Whitman. I'm 35 years old. And this is the story of how I became the one person my husband and his sister never expected to matter, until it was too late. It began in silence. The kind of silence you don't forget, because it marks the exact second when something irreversible happens. I was sitting at the edge of a sterile hospital bed, still holding Evelyn's hand, my mother-in-law's, as it grew colder by the second. Her fingers had gone still 20 minutes ago, but I didn't move. I just stayed there, unmoving, staring at the pale skin that had once scolded me with a single touch, or worse, brushed me away like a breeze. Now, there was no more brushing away. No more polite judgment in her eyes. No more clipped remarks about how I wasn't quite the Whitman type. Now there was just stillness. And that steady, cruel beep echoing from the heart monitor before it flatlined. The nurse came in, checked her vitals, and with a clinical softness I'll never forget, whispered, "Time of death, 3:15 p.m., Tuesday." Then she paused. I think she expected to see someone else, her son, maybe, or her daughter. But it was just me. Tyler, my husband, hadn't answered any of my calls. And Meredith, his sister, had all but vanished the moment the doctors said Evelyn was in her final days. No visits. Not even a text. The nurse stepped closer and gently held out an envelope. "Mrs. Evelyn asked this be given to you. Only after she passed." I took it without a word. My name, Anna Whitman, was written in slanted cursive. Not Dear Anna or even to Anna. Just my full name, like she was writing a label for something she wanted the world to find later. Inside was a folded letter. And taped to the paper was a key. Small, brass, old. A skeleton key, the kind you might find in an attic box or an antique shop. Below it, one single sentence written in that same narrow handwriting. "They never loved me. Now they'll understand what it feels like to be forgotten." My throat tightened. It wasn't just the words, it was the way they cut straight through me, like Evelyn knew something I hadn't dared admit aloud. That her own children had abandoned her. That maybe I was the only one left who stayed. The nurse hovered gently behind me. "Would you like me to call someone?" I shook my head, clutching the letter. "No, thank you." I don't know what my voice sounded like. Hollow? Disbelieving? But I walked out of that room like a ghost. Past families holding each other, children laughing in the hallway, and staff quietly moving along like nothing had just ended in room 204. Outside, the California sun was sharp, almost offensive. The kind that tries too hard to act like nothing's wrong. I sat in my car, stared straight ahead for a long time, and finally left one last message for Tyler. "Your mother died. 3:15 p.m. I was there. No more." I didn't expect a response. Not after 3 days of sitting at Evelyn's side alone. Of watching her breathing grow thinner, her lips part as if she wanted to say something, but never did. I held the key in my palm. It felt heavier than it should have. I couldn't stop touching it the entire ride home, as if trying to absorb whatever Evelyn had been trying to say in her final breath. That night, I placed the letter on the kitchen table and stared at it under the dull light, the key like a golden secret pressing down on the paper. At the bottom of the letter, just beneath the single chilling sentence, was an address. Aria Hill. 16, Old Pine Lane. I didn't know it. Tyler had never mentioned it. Neither had Meredith. It wasn't a vacation home, or part of the family estate, or even in any stories I'd heard growing up in their social circle. When I searched the map, I saw it was a little over an hour north, tucked into the woods near Shasta County. I clicked through satellite images. Trees. Dirt road. No nearby houses. The next morning, I didn't call Tyler. I didn't even leave a note. I just packed my coat, grabbed the key, and drove. The road to Aria Hill was like a descent into forgotten time. No streetlights. No gas stations. Just towering pines and a quiet sky that pressed in like it was holding its breath. Then, around a curve, the house appeared. It looked like something out of a forgotten novel, aged, elegant, and slowly disappearing into the trees. The gate in front creaked as I stepped out of the car and pushed it open. Hanging from it was a small wooden sign carved in delicate script. Maison Aria. The script was unmistakable. Evelyn's. The key slid into the door without resistance, as if it had been waiting for years. Inside was dust and stillness, but not decay. Everything was neat. Intentionally arranged. A vase of dried lavender on the mantel. A single photo of a young couple, Evelyn and a man I didn't recognize, laughing in black and white. I wandered room by room. Each one carried the weight of a life no one knew. Sheet music on a piano. Books organized by genre and decade. A velvet chair facing a wide window looking out onto the pines. But it was the room at the end of the hall that stopped me. The door slightly ajar. Inside, on a worn oak desk, was a cream envelope. On it was written, "To my attorney, Adrian Moore. To be opened only in the presence of Anna Whitman." I stared at the seal for a long time. Then I whispered aloud, as if Evelyn could hear me through the walls. "What did you do?" "I didn't open it. I couldn't." Instead, I sat in her old armchair, stared at the fireplace, and tried to piece together the woman I thought I knew, and the stranger who had built an entire world in secret. As if she had waited all this time, not for her children to understand, but for someone else to finally find her voice. And the longer I sat there, the more I felt it. Evelyn hadn't just left me a letter. She'd left me a legacy. One that her family would soon regret ever forgetting. I drove back from Aria Hill in silence. The wind whipped against the windows, but inside the car everything felt still, like I was suspended in the space between Evelyn's death and a secret she had handed only to me. By the time I reached Sacramento, the envelope addressed to Adrian Moore was already on the passenger seat, its weight growing heavier by the mile. Not physically, but emotionally. It felt like I was transporting something more than just paper. A turning point. A truth that would shift everything. Adrian Moore's office was located downtown, in a building that looked more like an old library than a legal practice, red brick, ivy creeping up the walls, and a wooden sign that read simply, "Moore and Associates, Family Law." Inside, it smelled faintly of lemon oil and old books. A young assistant at the front desk looked up when I entered and gave a nod like she had been expecting me. Maybe she had. Evelyn had been precise in everything else. It made sense she'd orchestrated this part too. "I have an envelope for Ms. Moore," I said, holding it out. "Are you Anna Whitman?" she asked. "Yes." "Please wait one moment." She disappeared behind a large wooden door. Less than a minute later, the door creaked open and a calm, commanding voice called, "Miss Whitman, please come in." Adrian Moore was in her 60s, with sleek silver hair cut close to her chin and dark, no-nonsense eyes behind a pair of reading glasses. She stood to greet me with a firm handshake and gestured to the seat across from her. "Evelyn spoke highly of you," she said as she took the envelope from my hands. "That's surprising," I said honestly. Adrian offered a tight smile. She was complex. But she was also honest. Especially near the end. She opened the envelope, read the contents in silence, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a thick manila file. She wanted this to be read in full, but only with everyone present. "Everyone?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. "Your husband. His sister. You." I sat back in the chair, my stomach tightening. Adrian continued. "She gave me power of attorney 2 months ago and updated her will at that time. We scheduled a posthumous reading to be triggered once her death was officially recorded. Does Tyler know?" "He and Meredith were both sent notices this morning. The reading will take place Thursday afternoon at 3. I nodded slowly, trying to suppress the sudden surge of anxiety in my chest. Thursday came too fast. Tyler and Meredith arrived 5 minutes late, walking into the room with the kind of swagger I had seen too many times before, like they were already bracing for some paperwork nuisance and a handful of dry condolences. Meredith barely looked at me as she dropped her designer bag on the chair. Tyler's expression was unreadable, but I caught the flicker of irritation when he saw me already seated next to Adrian. He still hadn't asked me about Evelyn. Or the days I spent at the cottage. Or even how I'd been after watching his mother take her last breath. Adrian waited until everyone was seated before she began. Thank you for coming. As you know, this is the official reading of Evelyn May Rogers' last will and testament, dated March 10th. Meredith rolled her eyes. Let's just get this over with. I'm guessing this is mostly about her jewelry or whatever was left after the hospital bills drained everything. Tyler said nothing. Adrian started reading. To my son, Tyler Rogers, she said, her voice even and firm, I leave the pocket watch that belonged to his father. Tyler once said he hoped to pass it on to his own child. May he, if he becomes a father, learn to appreciate the presence of one. Tyler blinked, clearly caught off guard. That one sentence had landed a blow sharper than anything I could have said. Because Evelyn had known, he hadn't been present. Not as a son. Not even as a man. Adrian continued. To my daughter, Meredith Jameson, I leave my handwritten family recipe book. The one she once called outdated. May she someday learn that food is not just a matter of taste, but of care. Meredith scoffed out loud. Is this a joke? It is not, Adrian said without flinching. Then she looked directly at me. And to my daughter-in-law, Anna Whitman, I leave the remainder of my estate. Including but not limited to the real property located at 16, Old Pine Lane, known as Maison Aria, all investment accounts and financial portfolios, my life insurance policy valued at $120,000, and any remaining personal assets. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Tyler stared at me like I'd sprouted horns. Meredith's face twisted in disbelief. What? She shrieked, standing so fast her chair screeched across the floor. That's not possible. She hated her. She didn't hate me, I said quietly, still stunned. She just never had the chance to say what she really thought. Adrian remained calm. If I may continue. The total estimated value of the estate is approximately $700,000. The house at Aria Hill is appraised at $310,000. Investments total $270,000. Life insurance, $120,000. All now under the sole ownership of Mrs. Anna Whitman. Meredith's hands were clenched into fists. No. She was manipulated. That's what this is. Anna tricked her somehow. Mom would never. Adrian interrupted, producing a thick envelope and a flash drive. Evelyn underwent an independent psychiatric evaluation a week before signing this document. She was declared fully competent and capable. The findings are included here. She also recorded several video statements explaining her decisions. Any legal dispute will be met with full documentation and supporting testimony. Tyler's voice was low and dangerous. What did you say to her, Anna? I didn't say anything, I said slowly, never breaking eye contact. I stayed. That's it. His mouth twitched. You can't keep all of it. I can. I will. The meeting ended not long after, but the storm had just begun. 3 weeks later, a lawsuit arrived. A thick packet delivered to my door by courier. A formal petition to invalidate the will, accusations of undue influence, lack of testamentary capacity, manipulation. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel surprise. I simply picked up the phone and called Adrian. I've been expecting this, she said. Come in tomorrow. We're going to finish what Evelyn started. What none of them knew, what I barely knew myself at the time, was that Evelyn had done more than leave me her estate. She left me ammunition. Evidence. Truth. And I was about to use all of it. The next morning, I arrived at Adrian Moore's office just after 9 a.m. A new folder was already waiting on the table when I stepped in. Sitting beside it was a man I hadn't met before, tall, clean-cut, with a calm but unreadable expression. "This is Julian Marks," Adrian said. "Estate litigation specialist. He'll be handling the lawsuit alongside me." Julian gave me a firm handshake. "Mrs. Whitman. Or may I call you Anna?" "Anna's fine," I replied. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He placed a small USB drive on the table and slid a thick set of documents in front of me. Evelyn was thorough. She didn't just update her will, she left a complete archive of her final year. We have psychological evaluations, independent witness statements from her nurses, care home documentation, and, he tapped the USB video recordings. In her own words. I stared at the flash drive like it was a grenade. "She knew they'd come after you," Adrian added. "She made sure they'd lose." There was a quiet pause before Julian asked, "Would you like to see the videos?" I nodded slowly. My hand trembled as I took the offered wireless mouse. Julian opened the first file. On screen was Evelyn, sitting upright in a soft lavender blouse, silver hair tied neatly back, eyes steady on the camera. January 12th. Tyler called after 3 months. Said he needed $2,000 for a broken air conditioner. When I said no, he hung up. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't call again for weeks. The screen flickered to another day. Evelyn again, a little more tired this time. February 6th. Meredith stopped by. Brought a cake. Said she was busy and could only stay 10 minutes. She didn't look me in the eye once. Each clip was like a pin pressed into my chest. She had documented everything. Cold, clear, undeniable. Another video played. Evelyn's voice was raspy but composed. March 3rd. Anna is the only one who stayed. She brought lavender oil and rubbed my feet. Didn't speak much. Just sat. But she saw me. And I realized, I've spent my life being invisible to the ones I gave everything to. And yet, somehow, the person they all dismissed is the only one who never turned away. When the final clip ended, silence filled the room. I wiped a tear from my cheek. She knew. She knew everything, Adrian said gently. That's why she left it to you. We prepared for court over the next 2 weeks. Every document was indexed, every testimony signed and sealed. We weren't just defending a will, we were defending a woman who had been emotionally discarded by her own family. The hearing was set for the Sacramento County Courthouse. That morning, the sky was overcast, the kind of soft gray that seems to slow the world down. Reporters were already milling near the steps, not because of Tyler or Meredith, but because Evelyn had once been a quiet advocate for elder care reform. A small clip of her speaking at a retirement forum years ago had recently resurfaced online. Inside, the courtroom felt like a different world. Meredith sat across from us, perfectly made up but visibly tense. Tyler wore a navy suit, but his eyes were dark, sunken. Their attorney was young, probably fresh out of law school, flipping through papers like he was hoping to find an escape route. Julian handled most of the defense. He opened with Evelyn's psychiatric evaluation, signed by Dr. Lowenstein, a nationally recognized cognitive specialist. Then came the video clips. Not all of them, just enough to paint a full, honest picture. Meredith's attorney tried to interrupt. She was on medication. Clearly emotional. Easily manipulated. Julian didn't even flinch. The evaluation confirms no signs of cognitive impairment. The videos are time-stamped, and the attending nurse's logs corroborate her memory and behavior on every recorded day. Then Adrian stood. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The plaintiff and her brother did not visit their mother during her final 3 months. That fact is verified by facility staff, phone logs, and personal testimony. Mrs. Evelyn Rogers chose to leave her estate to the only person who stood by her, Anna Whitman. Not out of manipulation, but clarity and pain. It was hard to look at Tyler's face in that moment. He was crumbling. Not from guilt, but from losing control. The judge took less than 10 minutes to return a verdict. Petition denied. Evelyn's will would stand. And Meredith Jameson was ordered to cover all court costs, including our legal fees. Meredith gasped. This is a scam. I'll appeal. The judge didn't even look up. You may. But I suggest you reconsider wasting the court's time. Especially when the truth is this clear. We walked out into the bright afternoon sun, reporters trying to catch reactions. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The following week, Meredith was fired from her job at Congressman Bennett's office. The court footage had leaked, showing her complete lack of involvement during her mother's final months. The same media she once used to project a perfect life had now turned the spotlight on her silence. Tyler's downfall followed shortly after. An audit of his real estate firm, triggered during the financial investigation for the estate dispute, uncovered discrepancies. He'd borrowed money from client deposits. His license was suspended pending a full investigation. Their lives began to unravel, but I felt nothing. No victory. No vindication. Just quiet. Evelyn hadn't given me this estate so I could punish them. She gave it to me because I stayed. And now it was time to decide what I would do with everything she left behind. The following morning, I returned to Aria Hill. This time, I wasn't a visitor. I was the owner. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled into the moss-lined driveway. The wind rustled softly through the pines. And for the first time since Evelyn died, I didn't feel like I was trespassing. The house didn't feel haunted. It felt like it had been waiting. I stepped inside and stood in the doorway for a long moment. The scent of lavender still lingered faintly. Dust motes danced in shafts of light spilling through the windows. It was peaceful, almost sacred. Like walking into someone's soul. That afternoon, I sat at the little desk near the window, the one Evelyn used as her writing corner, and spread the documents across its surface. Title deeds. Investment account information. Letters she had written but never sent. I found one dated only a month before she passed. It was addressed not to me, or to her children, but to herself. If they see this place again, they'll only see property. They'll never see the hours I spent here dreaming of a different life. One where I was listened to. Not used. Not tolerated. But chosen. That sentence echoed in me for days. The more I read, the clearer it became Evelyn hadn't just escaped here. She had built a sanctuary. One that her family never knew existed because they never asked. And now it was mine. By the end of the week, I had hired a local contractor. Not to sell the house. Not to flip it. But to restore it, to bring it back to the life Evelyn must have envisioned. The roof was the first to go. Then the plumbing. I replaced the peeling paint with a warm olive green. Restored the original wooden shutters. Left the stone chimney intact, just as Evelyn described it in her journals. She had called it her hill of second chances. That phrase stayed with me. 3 weeks later, with Adrian's help, I filed for nonprofit status. Aria Haven. That's what I named it. A community space. A shelter. A center for anyone who had been left behind. The first to arrive were the elderly neighbors from the surrounding hills, people who'd known Evelyn through church or gardening groups but hadn't seen her in years. One of them, a woman named Eleonora, brought a tin of old holiday cards Evelyn had written. She never missed a year, Eleonora said, brushing a tear from her cheek. Even when she got no reply. We sat on the porch with mugs of tea as the sun dipped behind the trees. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't just fixing a house, I was restoring someone's voice. Within 2 months, we had replaced all the windows, renovated the kitchen, and furnished the reading room with donated books. I kept Evelyn's piano, untouched, and left the lace cover just as she had. It felt wrong to move it. Each week, new faces came through the door. Lonely retirees. Single mothers needing a place to think. Veterans who just wanted someone to sit next to. One man, Samuel, came every Sunday. He never talked the first 3 visits. Just sat in the corner and watched. Then one day, after lunch, he walked up to me and said, "My wife passed last year. I haven't spoken to anyone since her funeral. Until now." I offered him a second plate of lasagna and simply said, "You're welcome to stay as long as you like." He cried into his napkin. But it wasn't sadness. It was relief. That night, I lit a single candle in Evelyn's room. Placed a note beside it. "They never loved you. But now, strangers do." A week later, the first message came from Meredith. "Zoe. Please. Just hear me out once. I know I'm not perfect. But I'm desperate." I didn't answer. An hour later, another message followed. "My account's overdrawn. My landlord's threatening eviction. The lawyer won't return my calls. Please. If not for me, then for Mom." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I took a photo of Evelyn's letter, the one she left for me on the hospital bed. The line burned into memory. "They never loved me. Now they'll understand what it feels like to be forgotten." I sent the image. Then blocked her number. Not out of cruelty. But because Evelyn had made herself clear. 2 days after that, Tyler showed up. Unannounced. No warning. Just stood outside the porch gate in a too-wrinkled shirt and scuffed dress shoes, trying to look casual. I didn't answer the door at first. Just watched him from behind the window curtain. He didn't leave. So finally, I opened the door but didn't step outside. "Anna," he said, as if we were in the middle of a conversation we'd never had. "I've been thinking a lot." "Too late," I replied. "I just want to talk." "About what? The inheritance? Or the fact that you couldn't even pick up the phone the day your mother died?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I know I handled things badly. Meredith, she's a mess." But I was overwhelmed. I let him squirm in silence. "I'm not here to fight," he added, holding out a small envelope. "I wrote you a letter. I didn't know what else to do." I didn't take it. Instead, I handed him something else. The divorce papers. Signed and stamped. "I already filed," I said. "I was just waiting to see if you'd show up with anything real." "You didn't." His smile faded. "You really think all this makes you better than us?" he snapped, suddenly losing the act. "That little charity house won't buy you peace." "No," I said. "But I never wanted peace. I wanted truth. And I found it. In the one person you both chose to forget." I stepped back inside and closed the door without another word. Through the window, I watched him stand there for a few seconds. Then he walked away, shoulders heavy, defeated. That night, I pulled Evelyn's final journal from the bookshelf. On the last page she had written, "Do not forgive. Let them beg and then walk away." I smiled softly, placed the journal on the nightstand, and turned out the light. I wasn't just living in Evelyn's house. I was fulfilling her promise. And somewhere, deep in the wind that passed through the pine trees, I swear I heard her voice whisper, "Good girl." The next morning, I stepped out onto the porch of Aria Haven and stood in the cool dawn air. The pine trees swayed gently as birds chirped somewhere deep in the woods. The house felt alive now, not with ghosts, but with purpose. Volunteers began arriving just after 9 a.m. Eleonora brought a basket of muffins and her nephew, who'd agreed to repaint the upstairs hallway. Samuel arrived 20 minutes later, wearing a clean white button-down shirt and carrying a stack of well-worn books. He nodded at me, his face breaking into a gentle smile. We were preparing for our first senior storytelling lunch, something Evelyn used to talk about in her journal. She had imagined a space where people could share memories without fear of being brushed off or told they were rambling. We called it Memory Table. By noon, the dining room was full. No formal speeches. No introductions. Just one seat at a time, one story at a time. I once danced with my wife under a streetlight in Florence, Samuel began, his voice slow, measured. We had no music. Just her humming. He smiled, eyes distant. People clapped from the balconies. I've never felt that kind of love since. The room went quiet for a moment, then Eleonora reached across and squeezed his hand. I remember Evelyn's peach cobbler, she said. She made it with this one spice, nutmeg or something fancy. I told her it was too sweet. She told me I was too bitter. Laughter broke out. Even I laughed. And that's when I knew, this wasn't just a house anymore. It was a home for people the world had forgotten. Exactly what Evelyn had wanted. That night, I returned to her small bedroom, the one I'd kept untouched except for a framed photo of her younger self above the dresser. I opened the last drawer of the writing desk and found something I hadn't noticed before. A sealed envelope. Tucked behind a stack of old gardening catalogs. My name was on it. I opened it slowly, hands trembling. Anna. If you're reading this, then you found it. I knew you would. I wasn't always proud of how I treated you. I saw too much of myself in you, and that scared me. But in the end, you stayed. You listened. And for someone like me, that means everything. Don't waste what I've given you trying to please those who never clapped when you won. Plant something instead. Leave something behind that grows. Not for them. For you. Evelyn. Tears slipped silently down my cheeks as I folded the letter. The next morning, I did exactly what she asked. I bought lavender seeds. Real ones. And with a small shovel, I climbed the hill behind the cottage, the one Evelyn had written about but hadn't had the strength to reach in her final months. I planted 5 bushes at the top, facing the valley. I didn't cry. I just breathed deeply, letting the scent of earth and pine fill my lungs, and thought, this is what it feels like to start again. That same afternoon, I received a call from a nonprofit based in Los Angeles. Someone had seen an article about Area Haven that had quietly gone viral. A local journalist wrote a piece titled, "One Woman's Inheritance Becomes a Sanctuary for the Forgotten." They wanted me to speak at their Elder Care Awareness Conference. At first, I said no. I wasn't a public speaker. I wasn't a leader. But then I remembered Evelyn's words, plant something. I agreed. The conference was held in San Jose, inside a bright, glass-paneled event space filled with nurses, directors of care homes, and social workers. The moment I stepped on stage, I felt small. But then I looked into the crowd, and thought about every name in Evelyn's journals. Every story told around our lunch table. My name is Anna Whitman, I began. And I'm not a social worker. I'm not a therapist. I'm just someone who sat with a woman while she died, and realized the greatest tragedy wasn't that she was dying, but that she had been forgotten long before that. Silence. Then a murmur of agreement. Nods. Eyes wide and glassy. I shared Evelyn's story. Not as revenge, but as a call. Loneliness is not a weakness. It's a wound. And we're treating it like paperwork. The applause afterward felt like thunder rolling through my chest. A week later, I received a letter from Rowan Press. A senior editor had watched the speech online and wanted to meet. "I don't think your story is just a story," she said. "I think it's a blueprint for anyone who's been discarded or underestimated. We'd be honored if you'd write a book." I said yes. I wrote it in 3 months. Titled it The House on Aria Hill. It wasn't just Evelyn's story, it was everyone's who had ever sat at our table, stared at the wall, and whispered, "I thought no one would notice if I disappeared." We launched it at Aria Haven. No stage. Just a table of tea, apple pie made from Evelyn's recipe, and soft music playing in the background. The book sold out in the first week. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had finally been heard. Tyler moved to Arizona not long after our divorce was finalized. He married a 25-year-old receptionist from his old firm. I heard they live in a modest townhouse now. His brokerage license is still suspended. Meredith? Last I heard, she was working nights at a diner just outside Redding. Eleonora said she saw her once. No makeup. Eyes down. A woman walking under the weight of a name she once threw around like a shield. Neither of them called again. Not after the court loss. Not after the book. And I didn't reach out. Not out of spite. Out of peace. Because Evelyn taught me something that night she died in my arms. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone back in. Sometimes it just means walking away and not looking over your shoulder. Autumn crept into the hills slowly, like a memory returning in soft colors. The pine trees remained evergreen, but the maples scattered bursts of red and gold across the forest floor behind Aria Haven. The morning fog clung a little longer now, and the scent of cinnamon and lavender often danced together in the kitchen as volunteers baked for our weekend gatherings. On the 6-month anniversary of Aria Haven's opening, we planned something small. No press. No banners. Just the people who'd made this place what it had become. We called it the Area Circle. A reflection evening. As I walked the halls that afternoon, checking details with the care of someone protecting sacred ground, I passed Evelyn's portrait on the activity room wall. It wasn't a formal painting or some stiff-posed image, it was a mural painted by Adrienne's granddaughter, depicting Evelyn in her 20s, seated on the porch of Maison Aria, her hair caught by the wind, a book in her lap, and a small curly-haired dog nestled at her feet. Below the painting, engraved into a cedarwood plaque, were the words, "Not everyone abandoned stays silent. Some rewrite the story from the pieces." Guests started arriving just before sunset. Samuel helped hang fairy lights along the front porch. Eleonora arranged teacups on the table Evelyn used to sit by. A group of teenage volunteers from the nearby college brought handmade bookmarks printed with quotes from Evelyn's journals. When the gathering began, no one gave speeches. We simply lit a candle for every person who had felt forgotten once, and made it back. Then, quietly, I stood and walked to the center of the circle. I held a single sprig of lavender in my hand and said, "I used to think Evelyn was cold. Untouchable. Even cruel. But I was wrong. She wasn't unfeeling, she was used to being invisible." I paused. The air around me hung still. She raised children who never called back. Cooked meals for people who forgot her birthday. Wrote letters no one answered. And in the end, she realized something we all eventually face: if she didn't rewrite her story, no one else ever would. I looked out at the crowd, and for a moment, my eyes locked on a familiar face at the very back. Tyler. He stood silently near the stone archway, just beyond the edge of the firelight. He wasn't dressed sharply this time. No suit, no cologne. Just jeans, a jacket, and a face carved by time and consequence. I didn't react. I didn't nod. I just let the moment pass. Because if he had come for closure, he would have spoken. But he didn't. He left quietly as the music resumed, Autumn Leaves, Evelyn's favorite jazz piece. That night, after everyone had gone and the lights were dimmed, I sat in the reading room alone. The shelves were lined with Evelyn's books now, carefully preserved and labeled. Her journals were framed on the wall. And in a glass box on the far table, her last handwritten recipe for apricot tart, burnt on the edges, just the way she liked it. I opened the drawer beneath the window seat and pulled out the last journal she had started. Only a few pages were written before her health declined. One page was marked with a pressed flower. If someone had really listened, maybe I wouldn't have had to scream through silence. But if I had to choose, I'd want my story told. Not in my voice, but in the voice of someone who understood everything I never said. I ran my fingers over the words, my throat tight. She had chosen me not because I was perfect, but because I saw her. The next day, a message arrived from the California Community Care Coalition inviting me to be an ambassador for their new campaign, No One Left Behind. They wanted Aria Haven to be their model project. I accepted. I traveled across the state over the next few months, speaking in modest venues, sometimes in front of 5 people, sometimes in front of 50. I didn't give polished presentations. I read Evelyn's letters. I told stories about Samuel's dancing, about Eleanora's peach muffins, about the boy who cried because someone remembered his birthday for the first time in 4 years. People listened. And some of them cried. One afternoon, after a talk in Bakersfield, a young woman approached me in tears. My grandmother died alone. I didn't call her once that month. I thought she didn't care. But now, I realized she just stopped trying. I hugged her. That's all I could do. Because Evelyn's story wasn't just hers anymore. It was echoing. Months passed. Aria Haven grew. We added Wednesday reading circles for seniors with vision loss. Students from the local high school volunteered to read old novels, poems, even love letters from the past. We dedicated a section of the garden to memory stones, smooth river rocks where people could write names they didn't want forgotten. One rainy day, a woman named Teresa placed a stone with the word Mom written in soft purple ink. She whispered to me, she died 3 years ago. I didn't make it in time to say goodbye. This feels like I finally did. And in that moment, I knew. Evelyn's legacy wasn't in what she left behind. It was in what she began. She gave us a house. I gave it meaning. Together, we gave others a place to remember who they were. That winter, I climbed the hill again. The lavender had taken root, despite the cold. The bushes swayed gently in the wind, resilient and graceful. Just like Evelyn. Just like every soul who passed through Aria Haven's door. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I just smiled. Because I had planted something. And it was growing. 1 year to the day after Evelyn Rogers passed away, we held a memorial. It wasn't traditional, not the kind with stiff speeches, flower arrangements, or black dresses. Instead, we built a simple pine wood platform behind the house at Aria Haven, nestled beneath the trees. We served apple pie from Evelyn's recipe, brewed lavender tea, and laid out woven blankets on the grass where guests could sit, breathe, and remember. I didn't expect many people. After all, Evelyn had spent her final years in isolation, discarded by the very people who were supposed to love her. But by noon, more than 50 people had arrived. Some had known her briefly. Some had only come because they had read The House on Aria Hill. And some had once sat beside her at church, never realizing how lonely she'd been. The ceremony began with silence. Then, softly, a local jazz musician began to play Autumn Leaves, the song Evelyn used to listen to every Sunday morning. No one spoke. The music spoke for us. When the final notes faded into the trees, I stepped onto the platform. In my hand was the last lavender sprig I had pressed between the pages of Evelyn's journal, the same one she'd marked with those quiet, aching words, if someone had really listened. My name is Anna Whitman, I said, looking out over the faces before me. I wasn't Evelyn's daughter. But I was there when she passed. I held her hand. I stayed when her own children didn't. I saw heads bow slightly. Eyes fill. I used to think Evelyn was cold. Unreachable. A woman made of sharp edges and silence. But now I understand, she wasn't made of stone. She was made of dust and bone and dreams she couldn't speak. She was invisible to the people who should have seen her most. I paused, holding the lavender to my heart. But here's the truth. Evelyn never wanted revenge. She wanted to matter. She wanted to be remembered. And she wanted a second chance, not for herself, but for someone else. That someone was me. And now, it's all of us. With that, I stepped aside and tugged gently on the white linen sheet that covered the back wall of the cottage. It fell away, revealing the newest addition to Aria Haven. A mural. It showed Evelyn as a young woman, sitting barefoot on the porch, her eyes fixed on the horizon, a lavender basket beside her, and her curly-haired dog resting near her feet. Above her, in elegant script, read the words. Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we plant. There was no applause. Just silence. Reverent. Heavy. Honest. Eleonora moved beside me, her voice low. She finally got to be seen, didn't she? She did, I whispered. The rest of the afternoon flowed gently. Samuel shared a poem he had written. A retired teacher spoke about Evelyn's early volunteer work with the local library. A quiet man in his 60s admitted he had lived next door to her for 15 years but never really asked how she was doing. She always smiled, he said, voice trembling. I thought that meant she was okay. I know better now. As the sun began to dip behind the trees, I lit the last candle at the base of the mural. Then, with the help of some of the volunteers, I opened the cottage for anyone who wanted to see Evelyn's journals, her piano, her framed recipe book, her story. That evening, long after the last guest left, I remained. The house was quiet again. But not empty. I stood in the reading room, looking at the rows of donations from around the state, books, letters, poems, even audio recordings from seniors who wanted their voices preserved. We were now archiving them, cataloging their memories. Aria Haven had grown far beyond Evelyn. But she was still its soul. I opened her final journal one last time and added a new entry in my handwriting. A simple note. You didn't disappear. You became something bigger than yourself. You became a place. A home. A promise that no one else will be forgotten. I closed the book and placed it beside the one I had written. Then I stood and turned off the light. The porch was bathed in soft amber from the string lights overhead. I sat on the bench, wrapped in a shawl, and listened to the wind move through the pines. The air smelled like lavender. Somewhere in the distance, I imagined Evelyn walking that hill, looking back at the home she once built in secret, now filled with people, laughter, music, and stories. She was no longer just my mother-in-law. She was my guide. My friend. My legacy. And I was hers. The next morning, I received an email from a national publisher. They wanted to adapt the house on Aria Hill into a documentary, something quiet, beautiful, heartfelt. I said yes. Because Evelyn's story deserved more than a funeral. It deserved a beginning. The last time I visited the hilltop, the lavender bushes were blooming, even stronger than before. Bees hummed around them. The ground was firm, the scent sweet. I sat down in the soil and whispered, "We did it." A breeze rustled through the trees. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had inherited something. I felt like I had become someone. Someone who listened. Someone who stayed. Someone who planted more than she took. And Evelyn? She didn't die forgotten. She became unforgettable. Not every legacy is written in wealth or marble. Sometimes, it's written in silence, in lavender fields, in second chances. Evelyn Rogers was once invisible, but now, through Aria Haven and Anna's courage, she has become the voice for many. If this story moved you, share it. Let others know that listening is an act of love, and staying is an act of power. Subscribe to Revenge Echoes for more stories where justice, redemption, and human dignity find their voice.